All right. Take your seats, everyone. There are seats, plenty of seats up here in this beautiful front row. And row 3. Come on up, and a couple over on the eastern side in rows 3, 4, and 5. Hopefully your students all like the front rows. Impress those professors. All right. So we have the next 50 minutes with Ellen Ketels here, our Associate Dean of the Faculty, also a longtime professor of literature here at the college. She'll give an overview of what's required to graduate, lots of time for questions on different programs here at the college as well, including Keck Science and the new Integrated Sciences program as well. So with that, please give a big round of applause to Professor Ketels.
Hi, everyone. It's so nice to be here. And I may have met you at Inside CMC under the name of Rents. And so I just thought it would be really fun to, throw the whole team a curveball and change my name over this summer. But it's the same person. So I was talking to my dad this morning, and I was just remembering, when he dropped me off at college. And it was just me and my dad in high school. And so that drop off was super intense. And I've just been thinking of all of you today and what you're going through. And I had my dad laughing on the phone this morning because we were trying to remember when on the drive from St. Louis Airport to Washington University in St. Louis, we discovered that my teddy bear was not in the car. And neither of us can remember exactly where we were or if we had made it all the way to campus or whatnot. But there definitely was some driving involved, and we had to go back. And the saddest thing is we get back to the rental car place and we see it sitting there on someone's desk, but the office was locked. And there's my teddy bear just sitting there. And my dad whipped into action. I was so like, oh my gosh, what's he gonna do? And he was like, he went into like, let me speak to the manager mode, and like got that teddy bear and put it in the car, and we got to campus. So he and I were reminiscing about that this morning. So we're going to be talking a bit about academics, and there's a lot of nuts and bolts, but I also just want to recognize the fact that you've got a lot of other stuff going on right now. And so I want to say everything I'm sharing with you in these slides is available on our website. So, if you don't feel like you have to take in every last detail, because I know you have a lot going on. So I mentioned that I went to Washington University in St. Louis. I'm a New Yorker originally. Do I have any New Yorkers here? Yeah, a few. Okay, nice. I grew up in Pelham. It borders on the Bronx. So I then did my master's in Northern England, and I did my PhD at Columbia. And I moved here from Manhattan in 2009 as an assistant professor in the literature department, got tenure in 2015, and I joined the dean's office in the fall of 2020. Anybody remember the fall of 2020? That was a pretty exciting time to join the dean's office. So I thought that this year was going to be like the quote unquote normal orientation year, but I was bailing buckets of water out of my front yard this morning and thinking like, well, no, it's not going to be a normal one this year either. So anyway, thank you all for being here. So as I said, I've been at the college since 2009. I'm a medievalist, so my research has to do with medieval literature. In my teaching, though, I cover everything from ancient Greece to the 17th century. I teach freshman writing seminars, too, so I kind of do a little bit of everything. And sadly, I'm not actually teaching in the fall, so before you tell your child to take an FWS with me, sorry, I'm not actually teaching this fall. So let me get into some of these slides here. Before I do that, I just wanted to say we're going to talk first. I'm going to give a little bit of an overview of the requirements. You heard a little bit about that from DT. She was talking about the 32 units, et cetera, et cetera. We'll talk about some of that. I'm also going to talk to you about our academic advising program. And I actually just met with all of our first year academic advisors a few days ago. And then I want to give you a little window onto the CMC classroom, and more specifically my CMC classroom, because that's the one that I know the best. But I thought, because I'm Associate Dean of Faculty for Curriculum and because I've been teaching here for 14 years, I thought maybe I'm in a good place to tell you a little bit about what that looks and feels like. Okay, so this is kind of what we're all here for, right? This moment. That's what we're working toward. But we are about 32 units away from that. So you heard from DT that what's typical is 4 units per semester, or 8, across the year. On average, sometimes things take twists and turns. We have to modify. There's wiggle room in there. Sometimes people need to catch up. Sometimes students overload. There's lots of ways to do it. There isn't one pathway that everybody has to take. They spend roughly a third of their time doing GEs, a third of their time doing their major, and then a third of their time doing electives. We have majors, dual majors, double majors, and sequences. What word did I not just say? Minors. We don't do minors here. The dual major is when you basically take like 2/3 or 3/4 of a major. And you pair it with another dual major that's 3/4 of the major. And it's really popular here, and it gives students an opportunity to really dive pretty deep, whereas a minor might only get you a few courses, but a dual major really does cover a lot of ground. You can pair that with a sequence, and there's a whole list of those on campus on our website. And sequences give people an opportunity to dive more deeply into a specific, usually interdisciplinary area of study. And we require minimum C averages for their majors and during senior year. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about our GE program, because that's actually the bulk of what most first years are going to be taking. And it's the foundation of a liberal arts college. It's really central to what we do. And for me, as a professor here, I've often thought that it's a glorious launching pad to so many interests that students didn't even realize that they had. And so I teach the freshman writing seminar. That's one of our GE requirements. And I've seen so many students have an aha moment in there and think, oh my gosh, I didn't think that I liked doing this. I didn't think I was much of a reader, or I didn't think I was much of a writer, but maybe I want to do more. So, maybe they pick up another lit course or something like that. Let's look in particular at them. So FWS is our freshman writing seminar, and FHS is our freshman humanities seminar. And you don't take them at the same time. You take one in the fall and one in the spring. And the reason why we spread them out is because they're pretty writing intensive, both of them actually, writing and reading intensive. And it's good to spread them out across the year. I think doing them at the same time would just be way too much. And it doesn't matter which one you take in the fall and which one you take in the spring. I can see arguments in either direction, but they are writing intensive courses that students take in a cohort of just first year students. It's a really special experience for them. And we have FWS and FHS instructors who do reunions. And I've sometimes met with my FWS students like at graduation or something, so we get to come back together. It's a really special time for them in those courses. I can say more about this later if people want me to, but I'm going to just move through these slides. They're going to take a math or CS course as another one of their GEs. They can take any calculus course, any computer science course, any CMC math course. And they'll get a lot of advice from their academic advisor, from the registrar's office about which one to take. And I think I mentioned before that I'm a medievalist who specializes in literature, so I'm like the worst person to ask about what is the math requirement. But there is a flow chart that helps students understand which one would be appropriate for them based on what coursework they may or may not already have under their belts. They are also going to be taking a foreign language GE. And this is satisfied by the third college semester of a foreign language, by a placement exam, their AP/IB credit, their status as a native speaker, et cetera, et cetera. And they can work closely with the registrar's office to determine what's going to be the most appropriate, plan there for them. Many of our students are going to be taking their placement exams. Some may have already taken them online, depending on the language and the college that's offering it, et cetera, et cetera. Some of them will be taking placement exams this coming week. Okay. Lab science GE. They've got to take one natural science course with a lab. And so it's not just a science GE, it's a lab science GE. So they have to, that's one thing with my advisees. I always remind them, when they go into the portal to look at the courses, make sure it says lab science, make sure it has an L after the number. There's a lot of different ones that they can take. And so if you happen to have a student who's feeling nervous about the lab science GE, there's a whole range of offerings. We encourage people to finish it by the end of the second year. That doesn't always happen, but we encourage students to do it early rather than later. Okay, PE. They can take any 3 PE courses, 2 seasons of a sport, or do ROTC training. And the PE courses really run the gamut. You can satisfy it by taking Zumba. So it's a pretty sweet deal. Also, have you seen our gym? It's gorgeous. It's at the other end of campus. Faculty go there too. It's really fabulous. Okay, humanities courses. The students are going to take 2 of these outside their major. And what I mean by that is, if you're a literature major, you can't double dip and count one of your lit courses as your GE. So if you're a lit major, you're going to be taking courses in philosophy, religious studies, or foreign literature to satisfy those requirements. And within those specifications, it's pretty easy to satisfy it. Any lit course will do. Pretty much any religious studies course will do, et cetera, et cetera. So students really have a wide range of options. And I would say that that's true also for the social science GEs. And again, it's 3 outside the major. So if you're majoring in econ, you're taking all of the other 3, right? Because your econ courses are satisfying requirements for your major, so you're not double dipping. So econ majors are going to take Gov, History, and Psych. A Psych major is going to take History, Gov, Econ, et cetera, et cetera. But again, really easy to satisfy these courses. You're taking Econ 50 or Gov 20. We have lots of sections of those. And I work really closely with the Dean of the Faculty, Heather Antical, and the Registrar. We watch really closely as the seats fill up. Do we need to add another section, et cetera, et cetera. So we're really on top of that to make sure that we can satisfy the demand. And maybe that seems like a boring detail to mention because it's me just like watching numbers go up and down. But I think that's why you're at a small place, right? Because you've got 2 people keeping an eye on how many seats are available and what the demand is. And if there's demand, I'm going to do my best to satisfy that demand. And I'm watching it in real time as it's happening during registration. Okay, so a typical first semester schedule. Like I said, pretty heavy on the GEs. You're going to be taking probably a language course or some other humanities GE. You're going to be taking either FWS or FHS. And if you're thinking, oh my gosh, how do I choose? Some students will kind of look at all of their other courses first and then pick whatever FWS or FHS fits with that. Or some will say, it's only this FHS. If I don't get into this FHS, I'm not doing anything. You know, they'll plan their whole schedule around that. So there isn't a wrong approach there. Maybe they take a math course. Maybe they take some of their social science courses, PE. You know, I think it's actually great to do the PE classes early because I honestly think that for our students, it's good. Maybe this sounds weird, but as an advisor, I'm always asking, like, when was the last time you got outside and went for a walk? Are you getting sleep? Things like that. And I think it's really important for them to set those kinds of habits and to have a wide range of experiences on campus. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about academic advising. And I'm going to get into what's happening for your students just in a few days. So before, I'm looking ahead here to August 24th, but just a few days ago, this past Thursday, I met with all of the academic advisors for the first year, for the class of 2027. Each of your students has been paired with an academic advisor. An academic advisor has about 8 to 10 students in their cohort, and they're all going to have lunch together on August 24th. And they may or may not have already received an email from their academic advisor. Maybe they've had some back and forth. If they haven't, it's okay. Faculty are really busy in the summer, but it's going to happen. They'll meet for lunch, and before that, they'll attend a session on academic requirements where they're actually going to see a lot of the slides you just saw, because I've been using them in a few different arenas. So they're going to have lunch with their academic advisor, and then after that, they'll have an opportunity to attend an academic information session. And that's where they're like, oh, I'm going to go to the econ session, or I think international relations is where I want to hang out for the next hour. They'll just pick one and they do a deep dive. And then after that, they attend the majors and programs fair, which is like a glorious buffet of options and a lot of probably overly excited faculty staffing this thing and talking about, you know, every last detail. I actually have some photos for you from last year. We're going to be indoors this year where there's air conditioning, and that's going to be super nice. But last year we kept it outside because we were a little bit worried about, we didn't want people to feel like they had to be masking up and everything. And so, I mean, a year from now was, a year ago, it felt a little different than it does now. So we were outside, but it was fabulous. My colleagues in the psych department, they had the most decked out table. They had these huge posters from poster sessions they've actually given. It was great. And then this is just a screenshot of the Spotify playlist that I made. And I invited all of the faculty who are participating to give me song titles. And they asked for some pretty weird and sometimes esoteric things. But I listened to them first, and then, you know, I put them on our playlist. So that'll be playing in the background, and they'll just have an opportunity to talk to 10, 12 or more faculty members and just get a sense of what's happening on campus. It was such a great vibe. So after orientation, because we dump a lot on students and you, right, during these sessions. It's like a flood of information. It doesn't stop there. So it's not just like, show up at orientation, you better listen because that's the last time we're going to help you. No, that's not how it works. I was talking last week with the academic advisors about when they might want to be checking in with their students elsewhere in the semester. And for me, I think it's really important to check in at around the 1 month mark. In my experience, that's when a little bit of homesickness kind of starts to set in. You know, not that it wasn't there all along, but something about the 1 month mark. I think it's also because they're now having papers due. Things are getting a little bit harder, and they may have faced some challenges, and now they find like it's like the homesickness hits them because they're losing their reserves, like they're dipping into their reserves a bit, and they're starting to think, oh no, maybe I can't do this. And so I really encourage the academic advisors to, reach out at that point, take them out for coffee, get them into a small group, go to lunch at Collins, something like that. Get them talking with each other. Because sometimes when students feel really isolated, they think, oh, it's just me. And it's really not. Everybody's going through their own version of some of these same things. They definitely have to meet with their advisor in early November to get cleared for registration. And their advisor literally has to sit there and click a button that says clear. I love that. It makes me feel really powerful. Sometimes when I have an advisee in my office, I let them click the button and feel the power. We just cleared you for registration. They should also, well, let me say what clearance means. It's like when they start looking at their classes for the spring, they see what's available, and then they talk through it with their advisor. And what I do, and I think a lot of advisors do this, I basically give my advisees a little homework. I want you to look at the course listings ahead of time. When you come to my office is not the appropriate time to be starting that process. Look at what's available. Look at a list of the GE requirements. Where do you fit in that? What holes do you have left to fill? All of those kinds of things. So I give them the links and the checklists that they need to start doing that work. And then they come and talk to me, and we work it through, and I ask them questions about it. How did you come to this decision? 4 science classes. Maybe we want to diversify the portfolio. That seems like an awful lot. So I'll ask them about it and get them thinking about their options and what haven't they thought about yet. Also, I think academic advisors definitely need to be in touch when there's an academic advisory or low grade notification. Those will be sent by a professor when, if somebody hasn't been attending class, or somebody hasn't been turning stuff in, or they didn't do great on a midterm, et cetera, any number of reasons. And it's really sending an alert to a broader support system. And it's letting the student know, your progress isn't where you want it to be, probably. But it's also letting the Dean of Students office know, it's letting their academic advisor know, and it's letting the registrar's office know. And especially for first-year students, we take that really seriously. As an advisor, I'm then going to reach out to my student and say, I noticed you're having trouble turning in your psych posts. You want to talk about that? Or, what kind of plan do you have in place for getting back on track? And even just that email can hold the student accountable and have them say, okay, right, yeah, I gotta get on that. Yep, I just have been a little behind. I've been prioritizing other things. Sometimes we'll get together for coffee. It kind of depends on what the student feels like doing. I'll kind of read them and see what they want. But I ask them about it, and it's an opportunity to have a conversation. And as an academic advisor for first-year students, I'm often the first person they're really meeting on campus, the first faculty member. So they might feel more comfortable talking to me about it than the professor, for example, who's giving the low-grade notice. And so I can say, well, okay, you should go to their office hours. Oh, well, that's scary. Okay, well, let's talk about that. Maybe you can go in prepared. Maybe there's a couple things you want to say to your professor. It's okay to write them down and, read what's on the paper in front of you, So I'll try to normalize that process and kind of demystify it for them. When someone gets a low-grade notice, there are lots of ways. Their academic support advisor can support them, but we can also get them set up with a success coach. We can get them set up with tutoring. We can send them to the Center for Writing and Public Discourse, et cetera, et cetera. So many resources here for students. It's incredible. So I actually, maybe it sounds like I love low grade notices. I love low grade notices. They're so great. It's not great when students are sort of off track. But honestly, as a professor, I'm like, this little bump in the road, this is good stuff because you grow from that. And you're at a small place where it's all hands on deck and there's all these people to help you. So even though I sort of don't want anybody to ever get low grade notices, but when they happen, it's like we can do something about this and support each other. Okay, so academics in and out of the classroom. Our classrooms are super engaged. You know this already because it's a small place, 19 students in a classroom, sometimes even 12 or 15. So you know this already. There's nowhere to hide. It's super collaborative in that kind of space. They're at the centerpiece of a wide range of co-curricular opportunities. Research with faculty, all the kinds of programming that happens across the campus, not least of which at the Athenaeum. And a lot of professors will tie in AF speakers into their courses. And I'll give you a brief window onto my classroom, which is, for example, my FWS, which is called Making Monsters. And I wanted to show you an example of a kind of protracted assignment or exercise we do together. So it starts with them reading an essay outside of class, a scholarly article, and I pick like a gnarly one that's full of jargon. They're gonna like have to have a dictionary open while they're reading it. It's great. It's pretty short, but it's dense. And then in class, they don't know this yet, but their next homework assignment is gonna be synthesizing that gnarly, hard to read article. And so in class, I say, well, how do we do this? How do we synthesize this? And I had to write a book review of a book of essays. And I basically had to do a version of that for every single essay in the book. I had to write a little paragraph about it. And I thought, well, that's kind of a good example of what I'm trying to get them to do. And so I bring in a paragraph from that. And actually, it's the paragraph that I most hated writing. And because I want them to see, like, it's hard, even for me, and I had to go through a lot of drafts to get there. And so I show them, this is like my messy notes on the left, and then how I started my first draft on the right. And the first thing, they're like, wait, you like write stuff by hand? And then, so I fully acknowledge that the way I write might be really different from the way they write, but it gives them a sense of like, you know, how messy it is. And I crossed a lot of stuff out, you know, look, I'm rejecting my own writing. And then I show them like how I landed in a first typed up version. And you'll notice that I put blech in the margin because I was like, this paragraph is just terrible. But I revised it from there. And so I show them like, you know, the first version and the final version that actually got published. And we talk about like what changed and how it got better. And then in small groups, later in that hour together, I have them writing 2 sentences about a small section of that jargony essay they read. And it is like, I don't know, there's like this crackling energy in the room while they're writing together. And then one of them has to be the scribe and type it on the screen in front of the classroom. And they're like, oh my gosh, but then everybody will see what we wrote. And it's like, yeah, that's the idea. And then we have a paragraph on the screen all of a sudden, right? That we wrote together, sentence by sentence. And then we revise it as a full class. It's a really great process. And they come out of that hour thinking like, wow, you have to revise stuff a lot to make it good. I'm like, yes, my work here is done. But it also makes it engaging and interesting to them. And they start to think about how revision is not just making something that was bad good. Let's not think about it in those kinds of binaries. It's more like, oh, I understand what I'm trying to say. And I had to think through it in order to get there. It didn't happen the first time. And that makes sense because my brain, like writing is thinking. Okay, I'll end my nerd out about my class. I want to close by saying help is always at hand, and I feel like I've been mentioning that this whole time, but you came to a small place because you want all these resources, whether it's the academic advisor that they're going to have lunch with next week, or the peer tutors that they encounter at our Center for Writing and Public Discourse, or the Quantitative and Computing Lab. There are so many support systems here for them. They can make appointments. They can just walk in an afternoon, randomly show up and get help. I didn't mention the CARE textbook loan program, but that's also another wonderful thing. Lots of textbooks available for their use. maybe I'll pause there, and I would love to hear what questions you have. And I also want you to know you can email me later, eketels@cmc.edu.
Start over here, and then we'll jump over there. Like your name and where you're
Willamine de Klerk from Seattle. I just was wondering on the mechanics of actually class registration. I'm assuming not every kid gets to take exactly the classes that they put down as their first choices. So can you just talk a little bit through kind of what it's like for a freshman who has a very set idea of like, I don't want to
Yes.
be up before 9 and I want to be done by 2, and how do I stuff this all in?
Right.
And in addition, also, how do they have access to the other schools? For example, a student who wants to start a language, if it's like Italian one is only offered by Scripps, how do they access that?
Okay.
Capacity.
Yeah, thanks. So if you go on our website and click on the portal, you can actually access our course schedule as a visitor. It looks a little bit different than if you're logging in as a student or a faculty member, but you can see everything that's there. Our portal is an incredible machine that puts together all of the course offerings from across the entire consortium. And so we plot out our schedules years in advance, right? So that a Pomona student doesn't have time conflicts trying to take a CMC class, et cetera, vice versa. So students have the wide range of course offerings across the consortium is wide open to them, and they can see it at all times. In terms of first year registration, it's never harder than it is this week. Registration gets easier as you go because they're getting here and everybody else at CMC has been able to register before they did. And that's just how it is. So I always advise my students, have a plan A, have a plan B, have a plan C, don't put all your eggs in one basket. And if you're having trouble putting it all together, the registrar's office is an excellent resource, as is your academic advisor. I'll also say that in courses that tend to be super high demand, we will kind of make the seats available, 5 at a time throughout the day, so that more people have an opportunity to register for them. So we do our best to kind of control the flow as people are registering. And students also have a specific time slot when they're registering. So it isn't just like a 350 person free for all at 9 a.m. So it happens in a more organized way. The registrar's office, okay, this room right here will be full of first year guides with laptops who can help students register. The registrar's office will be like, I don't know, central command, and everybody will be like on the phone and on their laptops, et cetera, et cetera. So your student could register on their laptop from the privacy of their dorm room. They could come here and do it with a first year guide. They could do it in the registrar's office with the registrar. They could do it with their academic advisor. So there's a lot of options there. I hope that answers your question. Yeah.
I have the question over here. Great. Let's pass that down.
Hi, I saw the slide and understand the one about 3 semesters of a foreign language.
Yeah.
But then on a subsequent slide, it said foreign literature.
Oh, yeah.
Is that really just a 4th plus semester of language? Like, should that?
Well, so the foreign literature class is not an actual language class, right? It's like you'd be reading French literature and poetry in French rather than learning the mechanics of the grammar.
But for example, it would be like Spanish 4, for lack of a better.
I think so.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. I'd have to kind of look at the specific numbering, and it should be clear in the course descriptions, is this a language course or would this satisfy the foreign literature requirement?
Hi, can you talk a little bit about academic advising and registration for transfer students because they have a little bit less time to complete all of the degree requirements?
That's right. And actually, transfer students have already been registered for most, if not all, of their courses. And the registrar's office works on that really quickly. And we have ways to Zoom people, like I shouldn't have used the word Zoom because I didn't actually mean, like, I meant fast track. I didn't mean like they're taking a class on Zoom. We can get them into courses that appear to be full. We'll work directly with the faculty members and we'll say, gosh, we've got somebody who's on track to be graduating in this year. They need this requirement, and we do our best to make it happen. And there was another question in this row as well.
So if our kid wants to double major, does that change the humanities or anything else that they need to take the requirements?
No, it doesn't. Sometimes, I mean, they'll work closely with the registrar's office to figure out like how they're going to do that, and do they need an extra course in the social sciences? Kind of depends on which dual or double major they're doing. But no, and they I mean, if you're doing a double major, you're doing a full 2 majors, right? The dual major is where you do a little bit less of each one. A full double major, it's a lot of courses, and so it does take some planning on the student's part to make sure they can get all of those credits in. But between the support they're going to get from a first-year advisor, maybe another advisor specifically in their major, if their academic advisor, they kind of change track from there, plus the registrar, they're going to know every step along the way what benchmarks they need to hit to get that done.
It just seems as though with all the help and support they have for registration, I'm thinking most students get their selections, or what happens? I mean, how many % of the students don't get what they want?
Well, I don't know a percentage of what students don't get what they want. I mean, I think most students get, maybe if not their first FWS choice, maybe their second. There's a lot of opportunity there. There are a lot of sections of different things. So sometimes we have to say, be a little flexible. This one's, a similar topic, or also taught by a professor in the philosophy course, and we can steer them toward, what might be a good next option if they don't get their first one. There's
Hi, the athletes that have to work around practice schedules and game schedules, how does that work out when they're doing their scheduling, and is there issues with that?
What I always tell my athletes is, I ask them a lot of questions, like, when are you actually in season? And if your spring is your crazy time for your sport, then I want you to put the courses you're nervous about in the fall, And so I work with them directly to say, let's think about the reality of your schedule and how you work best, I find that athletes, they're up earlier than everybody else. And so earlier morning classes can often work out really well for them. It kind of depends on the sport. When they're away for games and whatnot, the athletics department will work with my office, Dean of Faculty's office, and also with the professor to just help faculty be aware this person's going to be gone this weekend. What kind of support do they need to do, or can they have an extra day to turn in this paper, et cetera, et cetera. We had this didn't happen, but it almost did. We had finalists we had like national finalists for 3 teams. Like it was possible that 3 teams worth of students were going to miss their final exams in the spring. And I was like, Thundercats are go. We got this. And I had all of these classrooms booked and all these extra proctors. And I talked to all the professors. And then they didn't get in, but we were ready to make it happen. So, some of it's on the student. Like, you're an athlete, you need to be on top of your schedule, and you also need to think hard about, like, when do you do your best work and how are you going to get it done? There's that piece of it. And then there's also like, okay, an amazing thing's happened for your team. Let's figure out a way we can support you in this.
I had a question about the new integrated sciences program.
Yeah.
And DT spoke about how this class will have a chance next year to choose whether to follow that program or to continue within, I think, the current KEC program. What does that really mean to choose between the two? and in terms of the practicalities of it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, the choice is going to be the integrated sciences major, which is going to be the signature science major here. The choice between that and I'm going to major in molecular biology. So that's the heart of the choice. But as I understand it, students are, we're developing this curriculum now, and they'll be able to incorporate courses from that into a KEC major, for example. So there's going to be some back and forth. And so I feel like in some ways, the class of 2027 has a whole lot of options because they'll graduate with a major through KEC, and they'll be able to take advantage of the curriculum that we're developing here. And I really do mean we're developing it now. I've been meeting regularly with Professor Ron Libeskind-Hadass about the design of the program. I mean, you've maybe read about it on our website. It's really interesting and innovative. I also helped him develop Sci 10, which is the GE science course that was piloted last year. And it was really cool. And I never thought I would get super excited about like water samples from Pomona, but they did this like water sample collection thing, and running the data on it and analyzing it as part of the course. And some of these students really hadn't done any programming before. And it was really exciting to see the development of that course and then the actual follow through.
Okay, so you mentioned the 4 classes per semester. If somebody's going to double major or dual major, are there times then that they're going to be taking more than 4 classes? That's my first question.
Okay.
Second question, for these freshmen, like you talked about reviewing all the courses in the portal and stuff.
Yeah.
And plan A, plan B, plan C, should they have like researched all this before Thursday or Friday? Have they been getting emails, or should we warn them?
Yeah, I mean, they'll have a chance to talk about it with their advisor, and they're going to go to a session in the morning, where the registrar will tell them how to use the portal. I mean, the main thing is like, let's manage our expectations. Like, you're not going to get into the graduate level course in international relations because you're not ready for that, right? Like, we need to take Gov 20 first. So it's helping them, they're so excited to be here, and it's like they want to get to the finish line as fast as possible. And it's like, let's slow down, and you're going to take some of these like basics first. So for some of them, that's a little bit of an adjustment that they need to work through, because they're thinking like, no, but I want to be a specialist on Rwanda. I want to take that class now. And it's like, well, you can't actually, because there's 5 prerequisites. So let's start with those. But their academic advisor can help them, figure that out and start to think about a more manageable approach to those end goals. In terms of your question about 4 per semester, it is possible for students to overload. They have to meet a certain GPA level. And if they don't meet the GPA level, they can petition the Academic Standards Committee. Maybe they're like within a hair or 2 of it, and we'll review it and say, okay, I think we should let them take this extra course. We don't want students to overload all the time, because it's just a recipe for mid-semester, the wheels coming off, And so we do put up some guardrails there, but a lot of students will overload. I think we don't even let them do it in the fall of the first year. I honestly can't remember if we let them do it in the spring. I'd have to look that up. But in later semesters, it's easier to do that, and many students do. But they have to meet certain GPA thresholds. And if they don't, then we'll say, don't do 5 classes, because that's super intense, and just work on improving your grades in the 4.
Just to follow up on that, is it possible to do a dual or a double without having to overload?
Yes.
Hi, this is a 2-part questions. First, some of the high school students already take those AP classes with the exam. So what kind of a credit they can give on the CMC? Second, if the student decide to take your CMC sponsored DC internship program or Bay Area program, right? Without that semester, how does that impact his graduation, that 4 semester units graduation requirement?
Yeah. Okay. So the first question, oh my God, it went in one ear and out the other. Oh, AP credit. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so it kind of depends on the GE and the course and what the AP was. So, for example, for literature, if somebody got a 5 on the AP, instead of taking freshman writing seminar, they can take just a different lit course to satisfy that GE. So there are different ways to do it. It kind of just depends on the discipline and the area. In terms of your question about study abroad, or whether it's one of the programs we offer in the U.S. or something outside of the U.S., it is purely possible to do that within the 4 years without having to overload and things like that. What I recommend to students is that they meet with somebody in the Office of Global Education and that they meet with the registrar. And it kind of depends on your major. Some majors, it's going to be really easy to take courses that count for that major elsewhere. For some disciplines, it's, you might be a little bit more limited in which programs you can pursue. And in the Office of Global Education, they'll say, oh my gosh, we've got the perfect program for psych majors because there's all of these courses that count. And so they'll steer a student toward some interesting programs to consider. I also like to advise students, if you're going, please don't take American literature in Italy. Yes, please take the course. I once had a student being like, is it okay if I take this course on Italian food and culture while I'm in Italy? And I was like, yes, I will be angry if you don't take that class. So for me, there's kind of a balance between, really getting the full experience of that country and taking things there that you couldn't take here, but then also the reality of making progress toward the degree. So Office of Global Education is where it's at for getting really good specific advice about navigating all that.
All right, we have time for one last question.
Just to clarify, in your example, you did show PE as a 5th class, and that's normally how it's done, correct?
A PE as a
5th class.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So that's not, those are worth a quarter credit or, a half credit sometimes. They're not full credit courses. Yeah. And they're not considered part of those 32 academic units. Thanks. That's a helpful question.
Okay, we'll do one more. That was quick.
Hi, just to clarify about the foreign language, they can satisfy it with the AP if they got a certain grade on the AP, but they still have to take a foreign literature class in that language?
No. They can take a foreign literature as one of their humanities requirements if they want to. But going back to the foreign language GE, AP is possibly one way to satisfy. Kind of depends on the language, and so they would need to be in touch with the registrar's office about that. Foreign literature, you could never take a course in foreign literature and graduate from CMC, but it is one way to satisfy one of your humanities requirements if you want to.
When I was in admission, I told everyone in the room, APs and IBs are what gets you into college. They don't get you out of college.
Yeah.
That was a good, at least here anyway. But do check with the registrar and the advisors, as they know each department kind of handles it a little bit differently. Big round of applause for Dean Ketels.